We can only imagine the stories that took place behind these abandoned castle walls, what world-changing decisions were made, and what future tyrants or leaders were born. Let's scan the scant remains of just a few abandoned castles from around the world. Gwrych Castle, North Wales, UK. Imagine inheriting a castle consisting of 128 rooms, 28 bedrooms, not to mention more than enough space for servants. The granddaughter of Gwrych Castle's first inhabitant, Lloyd Hesketh Bamford-Hesketh, left the castle to King George V, who at the time was the Prince of Wales. In 1928, the castle was bought for £78,000, and most of its contents were sold to cover the cost. More than a decade later, the castle was used by about 200 Jewish refugees. When world peace returned, the castle was open to the public as a theme park, complete with a zoo. The castle soon had a new owner with plans to convert it into a luxury hotel and opera house, but these plans never materialized. Carberry Castle, Ireland. From North Wales, we moved to Ireland, to an ivy-clad castle built around the 16th century. The castle's edifice was severely damaged by cannon fire, and local farmers subsequently took the stones to build their own projects. The castle, with an inaccessible staircase, is now privately owned, and you can no longer snoop around the ruins. Still worth a visit though. Murmansk Castle, Sudogda, Russia. This castle can only be described as a grand display of Russian privilege. Legend has it that a nobleman from the late 19th century put the skills of a great architect to the test. Vladimir Krapovitsky had just returned home from France and hired architect Pierre Butsov from Moscow to design a grand estate. Some Frenchmen declared Russia to be an inferior country, and this got Krapovitsky hot under the collar. The result was a medieval-style German palace with a touch of French flair. Sadly, he was forced to flee his palace during the country's revolution and lived out his final days in poverty. Although the palace was repurposed in later years as a college and hospital, today it stands in ruins. Heidelberg Castle, Heidelberg, Germany. Arguably the most famous castle ruins, Heidelberg is perched high on a cliff over the town of Heidelberg in Germany. Constructed in the 1300s, this castle still inspires poets and writers alike, who are captivated by the castle's rich history. It was in use for 400 years when it got struck by lightning, which caused a fire that destroyed most of the structure. The area is now being protected to conserve the ruins. Bannerman Castle, Beacon, New York. Bannerman Castle once acted as an arms storage for Frank Bannerman, a Scottish munitions dealer in New York City. Bannerman and his wife eventually built a glamorous, castle-like home on the property, located on Polypal Island on the Hudson River. His name can still be seen on its walls, despite a powder explosion in 1920, several fires, and changes in ownership. Visitors can now tour the island by boat or kayak. The designs for this elaborately decorated buildings were drafted by Bannerman himself, but the contractors were allowed to interpret these designs to make it their own. Nearly all of the castle was completed without professional help from architects or engineers. Although most of the buildings served as storage for the business's inventory, a smaller castle on the top of the island was built as the family's summer home. The area was further beautified with flowers, paths, and terraces, some of which can still be seen today. Bannerman's death signaled the end of construction activities, leaving the castle open for several disasters, including a suspicious fire which burned for 3 days during the summer of 1969. Canadian singer Bryan Adams had a hit song called Summer of '69, but it's not related. Today you can visit the castle to appreciate its cultural and historical value, despite vandals and trespassers contributing to its decay throughout the years. Gwrych Castle, Belgium. This castle, with a history dating back to the 12th century, was constructed on the remains of a feudal fortress. Throughout its storied history, it belonged to several esteemed families and welcomed a bevy of luminaries, including painter Peter Paul Rubens, Van Dyck, Marie of Hungary, Marie de' Medici, Prince Eugene of Savoy, and the Duke of Marlborough. Over the years, the castle was sold, bought, and ultimately abandoned. In 1979, a group of concerned citizens formed a non-profit organization to restore the site. Castello di San Marzano, Righello, Italy. An Italian palazzo, constructed at the behest of a Spanish nobleman, has one of the largest parks in Tuscany, where many exotic tree species are planted. The decorative creations of the castle include an artificial cave with a statue of Venus, not to mention other pools and fountains. The picturesque 17th century castle has 365 unique rooms and was converted into a luxury hotel restaurant in the second half of the past century. The business did not work out and it had to close in 1990. It now enjoys the status of being an historical building. This incredible castle was offered on auction in October 2015 and then again 5 months later in May of 2016. Both auctions fell flat. Fasal Gebi, Gondar, Ethiopia. The next castle takes us to the Horn of Africa. Fasal Gebi was a fortress city back in the 16th and 17th centuries and was surrounded by a 3,000-foot wall. Within these walls there were palaces, a library, castles and churches. For years it remained the home of the Ethiopian emperors until 1864. The fortress city fell into disrepair due to the lack of maintenance, but remains an impressive structure to this day. Dunstanburgh Castle, Northumberland, England. Earl Thomas of Lancaster, a baron of King Edward II, and known as the wealthiest nobleman in England, built Dunstanburgh Castle as a symbol of defiance to the king in 1313. When their relationship had deteriorated, he built the fortress not only to protect himself, but also to humiliate the king. The direct translation of Dunstanburgh is the fort, borough, of the town, done, by the rock, stan. Due to unrest and conflict in the area, it could never recover to its former glory and is now a tourist attraction, offering ghost walks and wildlife observation. Ironically, when Earl Thomas wanted to find refuge in his castle, he was captured and sentenced to death. Kellies Castle, Malaysia. The unfinished castle of William Kelly Smith, a Scottish rubber plantation owner, is one of Malaysia's most interesting structures. Smith, who was a very wealthy businessman, had a grand vision for this castle, which he built especially for his family. The plans included a 6-story tower, an indoor tennis court, a rooftop entertainment center, and a wine cellar. Ironically, it would have featured Malaysia's first ever elevator. Smith wanted this to be the best castle to show off his wealth to all those who doubted him. Smith went on a routine trip to Europe to fetch his elevator himself, but sadly he contracted pneumonia and died before the project was complete. His sudden death prompted his heartbroken wife to sell the property, which was later abandoned. Today, this castle seems haunted, and there are more than enough stories going around to prove this theory. Perhaps this is what Smith wanted, for nobody but his family to live in the dream house he had built for them. Podhortsi Castle, Lviv Oblast, Ukraine. Podhortsi Castle is a grand estate built in the 17th century in Lviv Oblast, Ukraine. This beautiful home was built for a Polish military commander. The design, however, was done by an Italian architect by the name of Andrea Del Acqua. The castle, which has a large collection of art and weapons, was used for special events like balls and parties. By the 1800s, the castle had fallen into disrepair and eventually became a medical facility for tuberculosis patients before the discovery of antibiotics. Efforts to repair and maintain what is left of the castle have been ongoing since 1997. Karru Castle, Pembrokeshire, Wales. The Karru Castle is situated along the Karru River in Wales. While there were manors on the land dating back to the 1100s, the castle that remains partly intact today was built by a high-ranking officer from the 13th century, Sir Nicholas de Karru. After various owners were removed for treason or imprisoned by various monarchs, the castle was abandoned around 1686. The National Park Authority began restoring the structure in 1983, which is now a fully fledged tourist attraction. The area is also a special site of scientific interest due to the large population of bats on the land. Ogrodzeniec Castle, Poland. Since the 14th century, Ogrodzeniec Castle has been celebrated as an iconic medieval structure that defended the Polish crown. Like many other castles from this century, it suffered the same fate from conflict and devastating fires causing irreparable damage. The castle remains a beloved, enchanting site with a magical setting on a hill in Poland's Jura chain. Filmmakers, painters, and even rock stars have been captivated by its ambiance. The castle is said to be haunted by the black dog of Ogrodzeniec, which can be seen sneaking through the ruins at night, pulling a dark, rusty chain. Crag des Chevaliers, Horns Governorate, Syria. This enormous castle is one of the most important medieval castles in the world and was first inhabited by a group of Kurdish troops who had to guard it in the 11th century. This structure forms a big part of Syria's history. Historians began to investigate and learn more about it as renewed interest was sparked over the years. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and therefore maintained and preserved. Have you ever been to visit any of these abandoned castles? If so, share your experience with us in the comments below. 1. Chateau Gaylord, France. Chateau Gaylord, or the Saucy Castle, was built by the English Richard the Lionheart to defy the French in the 12th century, in a time when England and France were frequently at odds. This expensive castle took about 24 months to build and was known for its design, which was very advanced and complex for its time. Today, it is owned by the French government. This historic site is listed by travel agents as one of the must-see sites in Normandy. The castle has a rich history with stories of love, courage, battle, victory, loss, and scandal.